Have you read Do Anyone Dream of Electric Sheep just yet?
I'm gonna get in trouble for this. I have neither read the book nor watched the movie. I'm gonna lay my nerd cred for that.
Oh.
I know. And then I have to put on my fan hat. The fan hat says, "What are you, stupid? Why are you redoing?"
Yo, what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining in. As you can see, we have a very special guest here in the channel, so I think it's gonna be a fun one. We have Jonathan Koan from Jonathan Koan. So how are you doing tonight, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me on. It's great to collaborate with more booktubers because I know a lot of you guys in this space, but I've never really gotten to talk or be on the same video as you guys. So it's great.
Yeah, I saw that it was actually one of your 2024 goals in your goals video. So I'm happy to be one of the first ones to collaborate with you this
Mhm.
year. So I think it's a
Yeah.
fun video as well. And for everyone watching it, we're going to be talking about our top 5 each book to screen adaptations from fantasy and sci-fi books. So I have my 5 picked and selected. Jonathan, I think you have your 5 as well.
Mhm.
Drum roll, please. I think we're just going to dive right into it for my very first one. With that one being Dune. Dune by Frank Herbert, which is one of my top books of all time. It's like in my top 3 right now, to be honest. I've read 4 books so far in the series from Frank Herbert. Got all the way past Children of Dune, got to God Emperor of Dune. So I love the series so far. But the movies, I'm a huge fan of the movies. Not only the Denis Villeneuve Part 1, but I'm also a fan of David Lynch's version as well, back in 1980s. I'm not sure if you've seen that one.
I have
But,
not seen that one.
oh, you haven't? So that one is definitely a mind trip. Um, at the time, this is in the 1980s, right? The graphics that they used, I mean, it looked like Minecraft
Mhm.
for the shields, but it got the job across, I thought.
I saw someone put a side by side of the old Dune, the '84 Dune, with the Dune Part 2 trailer, and they basically cut the same scenes together. And even though the graphics are different, they both get the same vibe and feeling of the story,
Yes.
which is really good.
Have you seen any like Guild Navigators at all from the 1980s one? That's the one thing that was like, whoa, this is kind of out there.
Yeah, that's how they also depict it in some of the artwork for the Schools of Dune trilogy. They used that concept of how they made the Guild Navigators for the movie, and they used that in the books. So it's kind of part of the artwork officially now. So I'm curious to see how Villeneuve will handle the Navigators. I don't think we've seen them in the
No.
trailers yet. But I thought Dune Part 1 was completely fantastic. I would have also included
Yes.
it on my list if you hadn't included it too. I think that Dune, what makes at least the Villeneuve's version so good is it was able to not only be a good adaptation of the book, but as just a science fiction movie, it was able to really captivate audiences. Like, my parents aren't the biggest science fiction fantasy fans. They really only go because my brother and I like science fiction fantasy, so they just kind of go along with us. They went to go see the Dune, and they were shocked by it. They really enjoyed it, and now they're going to go with us to see the sequel. So it's got them really invested in the universe now.
That's good. I think it's great that Denis Villeneuve's version was able to capture a large mass audience of people. Because, when we read the book, I'm sure a lot of people, when they first read the first couple pages, they'll be like, yeah, I don't know about this. But then Denis Villeneuve, he put his spin on it. And I love his work, by the way. So Blade Runner 2049 is one of my favorite movies of all time. Arrival, an amazing movie. So he's just like the perfect director to adapt this book. And he did a fantastic job with Dune Part 1. Because I think it was like right around the halfway mark, we got into the actual book. So we have a whole nother part to get to. The only thing, which I think a lot of people will also agree with me, is that we were missing the dinner scene.
Yes.
The dinner scene full of all the political conniving, scheming, and all the people talking to each other, and you just see the agendas in everyone's back pocket. That's the one thing that I wished was in there, but I understand that it's an adaptation. It's whatever Denis feels that is best fit for the screen, but I would have liked it.
I can see that. My biggest problem with the first film was that because of the way they spaced out the action sequences, there are long amounts of time that weren't as appealing to general audiences with the where it's just focused on the political dialogue and the world building, which I really like, because I like not only political dialogue in any sense, but I also really happen to like the Dune world building. But that was something that made it more difficult for some people to get into, which is what I hope Dune Part 2 does better, because they don't have to do that introduction anymore, and also there's a lot more action in the second half of the book, especially that last 100 pages. It's like a Sanderlanche. It really picks up there.
Yeah, I know we got a little bit of a teaser in the latest trailer in terms of Paul riding something.
Yeah,
I'm not going to spoil it, but the trailer at least looked epic, so I'm super excited for that.
Yeah.
But you like the bagpipes too?
Yep.
In terms of the ambient, I feel like it added a good tone to it.
The score for the movie by Zimmer is just fantastic. Like, I'm not even a big Zimmer score fan. Like, some of his stuff's good, but he's never been my favorite composer. But the score for Dune Part 1 works so well, because not only does it work within each scene, but when you turn on the score afterwards, you feel like you're in the Dune universe. A lot of the music feels like it would fit with the planet or the location that you're at. So it feels like it could be in-universe music.
But yeah, that was my first pick for me, was Dune. Fantastic adaptation, not only the 1980s version, but the new one as well. So I'm super, super looking forward to Dune Part 2. And I was definitely disappointed that it got delayed, but I understand the reasons why. So I'm excited for it to come out in March. And hopefully it lives up to the end of what we expect in terms of that first book. But it's also insane that he's also potentially going to direct the second book.
That is going to be the hardest thing for him to direct. Have you read Dune Messiah?
Yes.
That is going to be a hard movie to make. I don't know how he's going to do it. I mean,
completely different
I'll be
tone.
there for it, but yeah, it's a completely different tone. And it's one of those projects that I think hardcore fans of the books will appreciate it, but a lot of casual people will be really surprised at the character choices and will be like, why would you treat this character that way?
And there's a definite lack of action in that second book. I mean, there is some towards the tail end for sure.
Yeah.
But not in the beginning, not in the middle, in the end. So will it capture audiences? We will find out. He'll add like a little bit of a spark to it to get people interested in the entire 2-hour movie or more. So yeah, that was my number one pick for me.
So I'll go with mine, my first one. And since you picked the seminal science fiction one, I guess I'll have to pick the seminal fantasy one. So I'm gonna start out talking about The Rings.
There we go.
Which, fantastic books, fantastic movies. I'll be honest, when it came to the books, I had a really hard time getting into them. I was able to read The Hobbit as a kid. I didn't hate it, but I thought it was okay. But I'm probably about age like 15 or 16, I tried to pick up the Lord of the Rings. I was reading Fellowship of the Ring, and I got to Tom Bombadil and just could not finish it, and I put it down for years. And then in college, I picked it back up again when I was more of a reader, and I was like, I'm gonna power through that. And I really enjoyed the books, and I thought they were really impressive, especially when you put them in the landscape of where literature was at the time and what the influences it's had since then. But then you think about the movies, which were a really hard thing, because there's so much world building that Peter Jackson had to do with the trilogy, but B, there's also a lot of changes that needed to be made in order to make it work in the trilogy. And there's the spectrum of how many changes do you make before it starts becoming an interpretation as opposed to an adaptation. And I think that he did a good job of, whenever he needed to stay loyal to something, he stayed loyal to it. And whenever he needed to deviate, the deviation works. And I know that they had some Tolkien experts and really hardcore fans of the books talking with the script writers in the process, and they would say, and even afterwards, they'd say, this line really works. I love this line, and I'm glad you guys included it from the book. And they're like, that's not from the book. We created that line wholesale, because it meshed with the dialogue so well. And then, of course, the great cast. The just about everyone, I think, was fantastically cast. I can't imagine another cast working for that. People always say, "Oh, I'd be interested to see how this person would do Gandalf or something," but I'm like, there's not a cast member that I'm like, I wish we could have replaced him or her. Like, I feel like every cast member did their best. And then, of course, the score. Howard Shore. Again, that's one of the things that I compare the two movies is, the Dune score feels very much like it could be in universe, not just in the sequence that you're watching, but it could be like that area of Dune. For Lord of the Rings, it feels like when you're in Rivendell, the music feels like music you'd hear in Rivendell. When you're in Hobbiton, the music feels like something you'd hear hobbits playing. Even in the action sequences, it really works well for that sequence. And so just on every level, it's a well-made movie, but it also gets the spirit of what I think the books meant, and really was able to generally entertain audiences. I know like a handful of people that don't love them, but most of the sci-fi fantasy nerds that I know, like, they love Lord of the Rings, and they still 20 years later rewatch them on a regular basis, have group rewatches even, because it means that much.
I'm at least once a year watching all three movies, extended edition as well. But I'm super excited that you chose Lord of the Rings, because I have a confession. I have not read Lord of the Rings just yet, any of the three in the trilogy. I've only read The Hobbit, which I was kind of like you. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I just thought it was okay, and it got a story across. I just wasn't in love with it like I was envisioning myself coming into a Tolkien book. I was expecting just to be head over heels in love with the world building, the characters. I just wasn't. For me, it was like a 3.5 out of 5. Like, it was good, but nothing that I would write home about. Which is why I'm super excited to get in Lord of the Ring, because all I hear is good things besides those 5 people that you mentioned, where they didn't love the movie that much. So we'll see about that. So overall, I'm happy you chose Lord of the Rings.
And with the book, there is an element of, if you're feeling bogged down in something, you can skim those pages and move ahead a little bit. And I would say, I think that book 1 is the most difficult to get into, because it's the one where he just will spend like pages and pages world building or stopping the story to do something tangential. Whereas in Two Towers and Return of the King, pretty much like you're getting world building throughout, but it's the story is unfolding a lot faster in those books. And I think each one picks up in speed. So if you can get through the first one, you can get through 2 and 3.
Well, let me ask you this. What did you think of Rings of Power?
So there's a couple ways to look at this show. I know a lot of people hated the show, and from like a critical perspective, I totally see all of the critiques of it. I don't think, when you compare it to Lord of the Rings, and even, in my opinion, when you compare it to the Hobbit trilogy, I don't think it stands up as much. However, if you're looking at it from a perspective of a take on Tolkien, it's entertaining. I didn't feel repulsed by it that a lot of hardcore fans did, but that's just generally my nature. I'm generally not repulsed by like projects. Like I know some people who have, like, within a franchise, like within Star Wars or Star Trek or something, they have very vehement opinions on, like, they love this element of the franchise and they hate this. And I have elements I love more than others, or elements that I just don't care for, but I generally don't vehemently hate. So for Rings of Power, it's like, it's enjoyable. Like, I didn't feel like I wasted my time with it at all. I felt like it was at least worth, the 8 hours I invested.
Yeah, 8 hours. You're right. Yeah, I'm like the same way. I'm not very hard to please. Like, if there's a little tidbit of something that I enjoy out of a book or movie, overall, I think it was a positive experience. So I feel the same way basically on that one. Like, I did not hate the TV show. It didn't feel the same. Yeah. Like you said, how the score in Lord of the Rings made you feel immersed into that world. It had a similar score. It didn't make me feel immersed. That's like the one one of the biggest things for me in Rings of Power.
And I have to say, I think that's been a problem with just about every science fiction and fantasy TV show that's long term, is that they've all seen, with the exception of one, which is also on my list, so I won't spoil what it is, but just about all of the science fiction fantasy TV shows have not had scores that have worked, because the people doing the scores generally do it the way TV scores work, and it's much lighter, and it's generally not as like there's like usually not a single track that you could point to like in the movie scores. I can point to many individual tracks for the Lord of the Rings score that I'm like, this particular track is amazing. I don't have that for Rings of Power, and I went back and listened to the score for it. It's just that it just doesn't have that re-listenability in the same way.
Now, moving on to my book number 2, the third book in this list. This is going to be a book by Philip K. Dick, and I have the Folio Society edition of it. You probably can't tell straight away what this is, but it's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is what the movie Blade Runner is based off of, directed by Ridley Scott. So have you read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep just yet?
I'm gonna be in trouble for this. I have neither read the book nor watched the movie. I'm gonna learn my nerd cred for that. I know.
What is going? Okay, wow, that is surprise. Well, now that's a good Jonathan Koan fact for the audience here.
Yeah, you can pillory me.
So I won't go into much in terms of spoilers. Just talk about the book. It's not that long. I think it's like around 250 pages, maybe even less. But what it did for me is that it made me question what it means to be human in terms of just the component of androids having feelings, people being immersed into this society where we have robots that are trying to live their own life. And the main character, Rick Deckard, who's going to be in the movie as well, he even questions himself sometimes. Am I human? And what's the purpose of life? Why am I still here? Which I love books like that just make you think. And I love the movie for a different set of reasons. Number one, the aesthetic, the feeling of the movie is different than the book. The whole cyberpunk feel in the movie is not really present that much in the book, which I thought was really interesting. So in the movie, there's neon posters everywhere. There's neon everywhere. It feels gritty. It feels dirty everywhere in the city. It feels slightly the same in the book. It's just a whole different tone to it. I also like the book as well because there's a whole religious aspect to it that's not really explored that much in the movie at all. Also, animals. Animals are a huge component in the book, which is only briefly touched in the movie, particularly when a owl comes on the scene, and also at the very end. I love the book. Makes me question if I'm even human. The movie is just a standard for me in terms of just cyberpunk, and it's one that I would definitely recommend for you to definitely go check out, especially if you're a science fiction fan. And it's not that long of a read either. I bet you can finish it tomorrow with your day off.
From what I've heard about the book to movie adaptation, it's one of those that leans more heavily into the interpretation as opposed to strict adaptation. Kind of like I believe The Shining was also more into the interpretation element, where the basic plot they could keep most of the plot beats the same though.
And most of the plot was mainly the same. The main character's job was exactly the same. The tests that they do on androids are exactly the same. It's just some of the outside elements. There's actually a whole character that's not even explored at all in the book. That's a whole second main character that's not in the movie at all.
So I guess my number 2 is going to be the A Song of Ice and Fire series that was turned into Game of Thrones. You have the first one.
There we go. What is that? I've never heard that.
I was hoping you were joking because I was like, oh my goodness. You were.
I was joking.
Yeah, good. Only one of us loses their nerd cred. Then you have A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, and I have the other books, but they're out of reach, so I can't go get them. But that is a show, and it's at the point right now where so many people are immediately going to pop up and be like, Game of Thrones season 8, and they're going to talk about how everyone reacted to season 8. However, when you look at it from an adaptation from a book to the show, I think that it is a terrific adaptation because it gets so much of the themes and the ideas of the book across. The tone, it nails the tone of the books. Generally, they still get the plot points, at least in the first 4 seasons that cover the first 3 books. They generally get those plot points together. And then also, I thought that, the score is just incredible on the show. That is the one science fiction fantasy show where throughout all 8 seasons, the bright spot continuously was the soundtrack. There are so many individual tracks in the Game of Thrones that I can be like, I will just turn that on when I'm driving. I'll turn that on when I'm cooking or something. They're just fantastic tracks that I love to listen to. And they kind of really set the tone of the show, but also in universe as well. I think that, of course, the cast they got was really good. There are some actors that I think would be better than others, and of course, I think that the writing could have been better in seasons 7 and 8. But for how many books were out at the time, they did a pretty good job adapting them. And I'm one of those that I did not particularly enjoy A Feast for Crows, and yet I liked the season that adapted Feast for Crows better. I liked seasons 5 and 6 better than I liked A Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, because I thought the show was just generally more entertaining in that space. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Have you read the books and or watched the series?
Hey, really quick, going to your comment about the score. The introduction or the intro music to Game of Thrones, I think it's just known around the world now. In terms of, you hear that music, you hear a few seconds of that, know exactly, all right, Game of Thrones, instantly. So I love the score as well. To answer your question, I did read the entire season or entire series besides the last book. I haven't read that one just yet. I read everything up until that point, and I definitely agree with you. I think it's a fantastic adaptation. Like, when I was reading the first book again, and after I watched the show, I was like, oh my gosh, this is almost scene for scene in the show. It's like almost spot on. So if that's not the definition of a good adaptation, I don't know what is. It was so spot on.
Yeah, I would say season 1 is season 1 of the show compared to the book is one of the most faithful adaptations out there. And whenever they had a change, you can pretty much see exactly why they had to make that change. And I was generally okay with them. I wish they would have changed some of the graphic elements of it, but then again, that's kind of what the fandom is known for. That's what the books are known for. So that would have been that. But it is generally at the beginning very faithful, and there's like political intrigue. When it comes to science fiction, Dune is probably the best when it comes to political intrigue. But for fantasy, it's not Lord of the Rings that's the best for political intrigue. And even though I love the Wheel of Time book series, it's not the Wheel of Time that is the best at political intrigue. It is Game of Thrones that's the best at it. And the show just, it was unparalleled in its ability, which is why I think that House of the Dragon has been so successful. Is it still gets that political intrigue, and the writing is still there, the music is still there, so everything was solid on it. So even though they basically lost the fan base in like one season with season 8, they regained it all back incredibly fast. Like, I've never seen a fandom go from it's so over to its peak in like just one turn.
Yeah, that's incredible. And my next one is a book I actually finished like 2 days ago. So you might even see me post about it on Twitter. But that's going to be Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. So I just finished this book literally 2 days ago. So I can definitely put it on my list now that I finally read it. And the book was fantastic. The movie was fantastic. But they have differences. A lot of differences, which I can definitely appreciate. Number one, the movie obviously I think is iconic, and it sparked an entire franchise. I mean, there's a whole theme park almost surrounded by dinosaurs now at Universal. The the book itself, I feel like there are so many differences compared to the movie, but I still loved it. Like, I don't know if you watched. Have you seen the movie and read the book?
Oh yes, I have read the book, and
Oh,
I
there it
enjoyed
is.
it. I gave the book like a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
good.
enjoyed it. It wasn't a favorite, but it was entertaining. The movie I would give like a 4.5 out of 5, 4.75 out of 5.
Mhm.
But the movie was terrific.
And the movie was so cinematic, which makes sense because it was a movie. But the book itself, it dove into so many technical details that was just you kind of glossed over in the movie,
Yeah.
which like is fine for a mass audience. They don't want to be in the details of like code. Like there was actually pages of code
Yeah.
in the book, which would not, I don't think would jive that well in the movie itself. And like also the characters, Hammond, who's such a nice and like honorable looking guy in the
In the movie.
is completely opposite.
Yep.
I was taken aback. I was like, who is this guy? He's a money hungry dude in the first one who's like completely in denial about everything, all the issues that people are bringing up. No, it's okay. No, we'll just hold off. Let's eat some ice cream, and it'll be better in the morning.
It was such an interesting directorial and acting choice that Richard Attenborough would, I think it was Richard Attenborough, or was it David? No, it's Richard Attenborough, that he would be so likable in the movie that he's still after his money. He still wants to make his money, but there are subtle choices, like him still saying, no, we want this to be a park for everyone, or spare no expense, or the way that he handles himself with the grandkids. And even, I think, at the end of the movie, when he says, I've decided not to endorse your park, the way he says, neither have I, or so have I. Like the way he acknowledges at the end, there's just something that makes him so likable. So even though a character like that should be, for all he does in the story, hated afterwards, you still look over him fondly, which is just really, really interesting how they were able to get that across.
He has that nice grandpa feel to him.
Yes, he
Like
does.
you want him to succeed. You want to see him not get eaten at all.
Mhm.
You want him to move on to the next movie, hopefully. So I love the book. I thought it was fantastic. I also thought the choice as well in terms of in the book, Timmy, like the boy in the kid pair, does almost everything. Like
Mhm.
he's the one that codes. He's the one that knows dinosaurs. He's the one that gets his sister out of trouble. But in the movie, they transform it a little bit. So hopefully that the female character has some good aspects as well, being able to code as well. Like I'm glad that they moved that in that direction because it looked like Timmy just knew everything in the
Yeah.
book.
And it would have come across as annoying more. In the movie, it's cute that he knows everything about dinosaurs, but if he also was this expert coder, you'd be like, all right, Timmy, you're
Come on.
you're too advanced. You have too much XP for where you are in the level. Next one I have is I'm picking pretty big ones here. I'm going with Harry Potter as a whole franchise, of course.
Harry
I
Potter.
think that it's a
Who's that by? Okay.
but still, it's by I was gonna try to do the joke of the who it's by, and I was like J.K. Rowling. Anyway,
Oh my god.
that's that joke. But no, this is this was an early example of a franchise really heavily utilizing the creator of the series throughout the movies, and even by the last few movies she was as involved as being a producer, and now she's writing the new movies. But again, gets the spirit, gets the score. For all of my picks and for most of your picks, including Jurassic Park,
Mhm.
what's been one thing that they've all had? Excellent scores. I
Mhm.
think that really helps in making your movie be a standout, as if you have just a terrific score. And then also what makes this book good is they did really good job with the casting, and even when they had to recast a few roles, the recast still went very well. They also had to make subtle changes, but this was a series where it was more about cutting stuff out than it was about changing. It was more about what stuff do we include and not include. And the worst book of movie, in my opinion, is Order of the Phoenix, because they had to cut out so much of that book, and so you're missing so much of the context. Whereas one of my favorite of the movies, most people disagree with me on this, is Chamber of Secrets, because they were able to basically make it page for page. It's pretty much, the book is pretty much the movie, especially if you watch the extended version, then it's like almost exact. And it's
There's
so
an
long.
extended version?
There is an extended version of the first two.
Oh, wow. I
Of the
didn't
first
know
two
that.
movies, because they were both Chris Columbus. And he does extended versions sometimes. But they are extended. They're not the extended. It's not like Lord of the Rings extended where you feel like you have to watch it. I watched it the one time extended, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch them regular after that. But I thought they were all really good. My favorite of the books is Deathly Hallows, and I thought that the movies for part 1 and part 2. Part 1 got a lot of hate for a long time, and I think it's grown on the fandom. But I think that both parts are really great adaptations, and really get one of my favorite themes is a character's self-sacrifice. So I won't spoil which character in case you are one of the few people on Earth who hasn't seen the Harry Potter movies or read the books. But there is a character who does self-sacrifice in this book, and I thought it was handled terrifically in the book and also terrifically in the movie.
So, real quick, I know like Harry Potter, the movies are just something that people would usually go to straight away for any book to screen adaptation.
Yeah.
With them being almost like perfect examples of great adaptations. Now, what do you think about them HBO readapting it into a TV show now?
So you have to put on two hats. First, I have to put on my business hat. And then I have to put on my fan hat. The fan hat says, "What are you, stupid? Why are you redoing them as a show? That is nuts. The movies were so good." And I think a lot of people would say, other people might say, well, look at Percy Jackson. They're redoing that over at Disney, and so far, as of us recording, I've heard nothing but good things about the adaptation there. And so they're like, see, you can redo adaptation. The difference to me is usually when you redo an adaptation, it's because the first one was either bad or because the first one was never finished. And so it doesn't feel complete, and it doesn't feel like they were able to like, it feels like, okay, it's worth doing redo if we can get the finale for it. Which is something else from one of my others that I'll talk about. But then, okay, now I have to do my business hat. If I'm an HBO executive, I'm a Warner Brothers executive, I'm looking at the different properties that I have right now. And I'm thinking, DC has elements that really work right now, the Batman, Joker, and has elements like the whole DCEU, which is just not working out financially. And you have the James Gunn stuff, but that says DC. You have other franchises that they have, but they're all generally smaller scale stuff. And they just most recently got Barbie, which was a big hit, but they're not moving full steam ahead on sequels because I think they are worried that the sequels won't do well. So thinking, what is our last surefire hit property that is guaranteed to make money? And that's Harry Potter. Now, because of the lack of popularity for the Fantastic Beasts films, even though I loved them, the lack of popularity for those films, and the taint of the brand right now because of how controversial the creator of it is, it's not, if they did movies, they would do nowhere near that successfully. However, putting them on Max, where they can get ad revenue from them, and they can produce them for perhaps a little bit of a cheaper price point, might be worth it. So on the business side of it, I understand why they're doing it, but I'm not gonna say I'm excited for it. I'll watch them, but I'm trepidatious about it.
Good selection there. My next one might be a little bit controversial, in that a lot of people are not a fan of either of these, but I'm a fan of both. Okay. With that being Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I have read this book here like 4 or 5 times just because of how cozy it is to me, in terms of the main character going through this whole personal growth story, but also being a geek, a nerd, which I'm sure a lot of people watching this as well are going to fit that similar type of mold where you love video games, you love reading, you love lore. This character gets into all of that. And it's just a character you can really root for. And I love the book. I love the old 80s references. Even though I wasn't born in the 80s, I never lived in the 80s. I love the 80s references because it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to get through. And the book itself, the ending, it was great. I thought the ending was good. It was a good point to end the book as well. Did it need a sequel? No. It did not need a sequel.
Whew, boy, did that sequel get a lot of hate when it came out.
The sequel, that's a whole different video. But the movie by Steven Spielberg, who directed it, who also did Jurassic Park. So we got 2 Steven Spielbergs on here.
Very different movie from him, though. Woo!
Yes. But the movie, it felt different than the book. There was a lot of things I loved from the book that was not in this movie at all. Especially the eggs, like the egg scenes in terms of how, or the clues on how our main character got from each checkpoint basically was completely different. And there's like some scenes like in the very beginning when he's at school and he's stuck on this planet because he doesn't have enough credits to move across cyberspace. That wasn't explored at all in the movie, where in the movie it appeared that everyone can just transport anywhere, anytime, at any point. Where in the book, you need money. You need money to travel. And I love that aspect of it. Also, the world outside is in complete chaos. It's a complete dystopia almost, where everyone is just in poverty, which I thought they did capture that pretty well, especially the stacks. The stacks looked super cool in the movie. But overall, the movie, just like any Steven Spielberg movie, it was super cinematic. There were so many scenes that just stick out into your brain. Like when I was watching the movie with one of my friends, and my friend, he's kind of a hard critic sometimes. And not many movies, he will agree with me in terms of being good, even though I love them. And he turned to me while we're watching this. He said, "Aaron, I love this. This is so good." I was like, yes, validation. We have a good movie on our hands here. So I love the movie. I love the book. I know that they're different, but I love them for their own reasons.
I think that one of the reasons that it works as referring to as cozy, as you put it, is that it's very believable in some certain ways. Obviously, some of the dystopian elements aren't the same, but the science fiction element of how virtual reality and how immersed we can become into that and how it can drive things isn't that much science fiction anymore, especially now. That was what the movie was, 2018 that it came out, somewhere around there, and so that's about 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now. Woo! But it's still very much believable. It is a much softer science fiction. Of course, once you get into that virtual reality, it's a little bit beyond the virtual reality we have at the moment, but you can see the advancements that things like Meta and Facebook are going towards, the things that Twitter is that Elon's trying to do there. So it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility, which is why I think it worked for so many audiences. And of course, you talk about the 80s references. That's what made things like Stranger Things and It super popular. Both of those were really big on the tail end of the 2010s as well, because that's just the type of thing that connects, like that. Those references work not only for people who lived in the 80s, but also people who have, parents who were in the 80s, or have watched movies from the 80s, or have read books from the 80s. So that's a good era to pull references from. If they had instead set all of the references in the 60s or set all the references in the 2000s, I don't know if it would have had quite the same connection with audiences. So my next pick is going to be the Narnia series. Particularly, I'm going to talk about the more recent movies from the 2000s. So you have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So I'm a big Narnia person. That's the one fantasy series that my parents have both read. My parents are not fantasy sci-fi readers, although I'm working on that. But I got both of them to read the Narnia books, and they enjoyed them. And my siblings, my sister read to me the Narnia books, when I was little, and so that I have that fond memory of the books. And at the same time, I thought the movies were solidly entertaining movies.
Mhm.
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, just I think that it was a really good example of Hollywood not necessarily agreeing with all of the themes, but still being loyal to all the themes that were present in the original material. And because of that, it worked really well. And I would say that Prince Caspian keeps the exact same themes. Voyage doesn't keep the same themes as well, but I think that Voyage is my least favorite of the books in the series. And so I didn't have this huge super love of the book going into the movie, and the changes that they made, I thought made it better, made the story better, making it more of it's not just because we want to find the seven lords, we have to find the seven swords of the seven lords. I thought that was a great way to do that. And then the book already has a little bit of a Caspian versus Edmund element, and I thought that the movie accentuated it for the better. And so I thought that, and the music for the whole trilogy, I thought was really good, particularly the first one. Although Prince Caspian has a good underrated soundtrack, and I don't know, have you seen the BBC version that they made back in like the 80s?
No.
I think it was 80s or maybe gone into 1990, but I'm pretty sure it was the 80s. It is also really good. They went further. They actually did those three that I mentioned plus Silver Chair.
Oh, wow.
But neither version made it all the way to Last Battle, and neither version included the beginning of the story, which is Magician's Nephew, and neither version included my favorite novel in the whole series, which is Horse and His Boy. So for that reason, I am interested in doing a remake, because I want to see those specific books adapted. And I would actually pitch saying start with Magician's Nephew, because you've already seen two versions of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and there's no way to do it but make fans angry. Like, I don't even if they got the best filmmakers and the best production involved, I don't see Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe doing well. However, if you start with Magician's Nephew, I think that because it's new and of the first time it's been adapted, I think that people might treat it better, and then they can go into the other books later. So that's a version of I'd be more interested in an adaptation. But for what we've already gotten, I think that they're really solid. And the through line for me is, the whole series is about the Pevensies and the world. But if you view the trilogy of movies they made, it's really just Lucy's story. You follow Lucy, who's the first one in and the last one out. And I thought that's a great way to bookend the story.
I actually have not read any Narnia books. I've only watched the first movie, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, which I really enjoyed. So maybe I should check out the other two that are out here pretty soon. And my last one here for me is a book I don't own. I have only read it digitally on my Kindle, with that being Wool by Hugh Howey, which is the adaptation, or the TV show adaptation is Silo, which I think some people still haven't checked out just yet, just because it's on Apple TV. And I know Apple TV is still kind of up and coming. I know it's been around for a while now.
Yeah.
But this is just a TV show that came out of nowhere for me, because I did not know anything about the books at all. I didn't even know it was based off a book after watching this show. And once I finished the show, I was like, oh my god, I need to see what happens next immediately. And that's when I found out that there's books. There's a whole series on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I bought the whole entire like complete set on Kindle, and that's when I just devoured the first book, being Wool. And then I realized that the first season of Silo is only like half of the first book, or there's just so much more in the book that was explored that we would need, like, it was still a huge question lingering at towards the tail end of the season. And going back to Rebecca Ferguson, she plays a fantastic character in that. She does a really good job in there. All the characters, or all the actors in Silent, I think did a fantastic job. And this is actually the one example on my list here where I would say that the TV show was actually more enjoyable for me than the book. I liked the book. I thought it was great, answered a lot of questions for me, but the TV show just had another level of suspense in almost every scene. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Like, bringing me back to Game of Thrones days. Before I even read Game of Thrones, I did not know what was going to happen, so I had no idea. It's unpredictable for me. This is what I felt again in Silo, and it's been a while since I've seen a TV show that's put me in that similar spot. So, loved it. Have you read it or watched that one?
So I have it on my TBR
There it
for
is.
summer of this year. So I intend to read it this summer. I can't specify more specifically, but somewhere around there. But I do intend to read it. I have the first book. I've been really interested in it. You talked about Apple TV Plus. Everything I've heard about, everything they make is of the highest quality. So I always now couch everything with, if I want a streamer to make it, I want Apple TV Plus to make it, because I have a good feeling that they'll do a good job with it. But that makes me excited to get to Silo, because I believe it'll be a good adaptation. And the author, actually, I've seen his Twitter. He's an interesting person on Twitter. So to get to it.
Yeah, Apple TV's great. Everything I've seen on there, like you were saying, has been fantastic. Like, quality again is just top tier. Like, it's hit or miss sometimes when you watch Netflix, where sometimes you get a banger out there like Stranger Things, where the quality is just top tier, and then you watch something that's like on Hallmark. It feels like a Hallmark low budget film where they didn't put too much into it. And that's usually the case, though. In a lot of films, you see it that rises in the top 10. You click that #1 movie of today, you're expecting big things out of it. You're like, this is it? This is #1 right now? I don't see why. But but now I'm really happy for you to dive into the book and the TV show, because they're both fantastic.
So my last one, I hope we can really quickly get our honorable mentions in afterwards, because I have a quick few things to say. But my last one of my top 5 is, I think, the most interesting of the adaptations, because I picked The Princess Bride, which I have, of all of the books that I talked about, I enjoyed the books and also loved the movie. And for your picks, the ones I read and watched, like Dune and Jurassic World and Jurassic Park, I enjoyed the books and enjoyed the movie. This is the only one on the list where I did not like the book, but I loved the movie.
Turn your mind around.
Yeah, the background behind this project is that William Goldman originally meant it to be a movie script when he wrote it, and he couldn't get Hollywood to buy it. And so he went back and wrote it as a novel, hoping that the novel would sell well enough that it would convince Hollywood that it's a good property, and Hollywood would go back and make the movie. So he did go back, he turned his script into novel format, which is the book, and he produced it, and it did pretty well, and so they made the movie. But the movie's based off of, again, that original script. The novel has so many weird decisions in it. The opening of the book is like a meta kind of story, where basically the narrator, who's supposed to be William Goldman, talks about how he found the manuscript of this novel, which was actually an ancient novel from like medieval times. Even though William Goldman actually wrote the novel, it's as if he found the manuscript, and the story is about him finding the manuscript, trying to publish it, and then it's about him having this weird potential affair. It is, and it goes on. I believe it's a solid portion. Let me check my notes, but it's a solid portion of the book. Anyway, and so because of that, it's a weird opening, and then the book has these weird chapter jumps where a chapter might be like 3 pages, and then the next chapter is like 80 pages, and then the next one's maybe 10, and then like usually most books, they have a range. You're going to be 10 to 20 pages, or you're going to be 8 to 25. Like, you usually don't have bigger than that, and when you do, it's a big deal. But to go from like 3 to 80 is just ridiculous. And so the movie, because it was always meant to be a movie, works really well. But the book was only turned into a book so he could prove that it would be worth it to make a movie. So
I definitely agree with you. That's an interesting pick that I don't think a lot of people would initially think of when thinking of a book to screen adaptation. So,
you've watched the movie?
I don't know. I might have. I don't know.
Well, that just means you need to rewatch the movie.
I agree. I need to see which streaming service that's on and turn it on.
We just we've had the DVD for a while.
Okay.
And of course, the movie also has the brilliant frame story of the grandfather talking with the kid, which is just really iconic.
Do you want to rapid fire your honorable mentions that you got?
Yes. So first, I will say Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which is not based off of a book, but it is based off of the role-playing universe and also the novel universe, The Forgotten Realms, which I think the movie perfectly got what it was like to play the Dungeons and Dragons game, and also perfectly got what an adventure one of the novels would be in Dungeons and Dragons, specifically in The Forgotten Realms. I'm doing a D&D campaign with some friends of mine right now, and there's so many times where I'm like, oh my goodness, the movie perfectly got that, or oh my goodness, I got to a thing with the drow, and I was like, oh, that's like Driz, and I was like able to connect all these things. And I like when the movie, like when they got to talk about Neverwinter, I'm like, I know where Neverwinter is. So that was a great one. And then also The Martian, which was just a hilarious book, hilarious movie. Both were excellently done.
Yeah, actually, I have not read The Martian, but I've read 2 other Andy Weir books, being Artemis and his most recent one, Project Hail Mary. So I think Project Hail Mary would be a fantastic movie to adapt, or book to adapt. I would love to see how they would get his friend. I'm not going to spoil it. How he would get the main character's friend adapted, because that'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
My rapid fire ones is, I had Harry Potter on my list as well, which you already covered, so we're good there. And then number 2 was The Expanse. So I've actually only read the first book, being Leviathan Wakes, which is right here. And that was like one of my top sci-fi books of all time. And I've watched a few episodes now of the first season of Expanse, and I freaking love it. They did a fantastic job. The next one is a little bit out there as well, with that being Annihilation. So this book was just a fever dream, a mind trip. And I think the movie did a fantastic job putting you in a similar state to where you just feel uneasy the entire movie. Especially when that weird bear creature thing starts walking around and making that weird sound. That scene, I think that feeling that you get when that thing enters the scene is your entire feeling in the book, which I really enjoyed. So I think they did a pretty good job. There was definitely some differences for sure in terms of the main character and like the ending. But overall, I thought it was a good adaptation. Is that our list?
That's our list. Solid picks.
Our top 10s plus some honorable mentions. All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Do you have any last words for whoever's watching this up until this point?
For one thing, thank you for staying with us this long. You're really helping the algorithm for us. Second, if you want to check out my channel, you just look up on YouTube Jonathan Koan. I'm going to do the Brian Lee Durfee pitch. I'm going to say, just search my name in the book review and it will magically appear on your screen. But you can just search my name, Jonathan Koan, and I do books of all genres, but I primarily focus on science fiction, fantasy, and media tie-in fiction.
So I'm going to link his channel in the description as well. So please go check out that channel. He has fantastic sci-fi, fantasy videos that's really helped me out, and great reviews. So again, Jonathan, I appreciate you joining me tonight. Hopefully we get some more good adaptations on our list in the future, and maybe we can have a round 2 of this sometime in the future.
Yeah, I have several science fiction fantasy properties that I am eagerly looking forward to, either the next season or a new season or a new movie coming out in the next couple of years. So we have a lot of potential coming up.
And fingers crossed, Dune Part 2 is going to be fantastic, which it most likely will be. So I think we're in good hands. Well, thank you guys for joining in. Hope you have a good one. Keep reading, and peace. See you guys.